Yogena chittasya padena vacham alam sharirasya ca vaidyagena yopakurotam pravaram muninam patanjalim pranjaliranadosmi stuve patanjalim vyasam shankaram ca munitrayam katra sutrasya bhashyasya kramadvivaranasya ca. So these are two verses of invocation which I explained many times in the beginning sessions. And those of you have any doubt about it, those who are joining for the first time, you can ask questions regarding this during interaction. Now we will take up this subject now. We have already completed this subject. I mean, this 15th sutra we have completed. As an introduction to the 16th one, we discussed this, what we call Chaturvyuhas, means the quadrangle. Quadrangle, 4 factors, 4 sections put together, forming a group, which is the very basis of Indian school of medicine known as Ayurveda, and that is true of Yoga Sutras also. So, as you remember, in Ayurveda, of course, we have disease, the cause of disease, freedom from disease, and remedy for the disease. So, 4 factors. Technically called Roga, Roga Nidanam, Roga Nivritti, and Bhaishajya means medicine. Similarly, according to yoga philosophy, this life itself is a big disease. This embodiment is a state of imperfection. This is at the very root of the philosophy of yoga. Remember, not behind the psychology of yoga. The psychology of yoga deals with essentially a way out of this problem. But the philosophy of yoga, which is again linked to the philosophy of Sankhya philosophy, it essentially underlines the principle that this life, as we find in our everyday experience, is not the most desirable status that we can attain. It is essentially, inherently a state of imperfection. We will discuss this when we discuss the 18th sutra and also some of the coming sutras. We'll discuss this. So, what constitutes the quadrangle? One is heya. So, you find the word heya is used. There are some books published by Harvard Oriental Series with some translations. You find heya paksha means from the standpoint of heya, something to be get rid of. That is the meaning of heya. Something to be cured, something to be remedied. That's the first element in the quadrangle of yoga. The second element is heya hetu, cause of this. So what is to be got rid of? Dukkha. Dukkha here means a state of imperfection. What is to be got rid of? That is dukkha. And then what is the cause of this dukkha? Association between Purusha and Prakriti. So you find Drisyayoho Samyogaha. That is the language Patanjali employs. The association between Purusha and Prakriti. That's again we will discuss in the coming sessions. Hanam means eradication, removal of this dukkha. So, in other words, this state of embodiment should be got rid of. What it means is, we must evolve further. That is the implication. Please remember this. This is very important. Eradicating of life is not is what is meant. Eradication of this state of imperfection. That's the meaning. How do we do that? By taking to yoga. Now, what does it mean to taking to yoga? Means you are trying to discover some higher possibilities in our life, in our existence. Going beyond the physical, going beyond the material, and reaching the spiritual dimension of our life, our personality. So that is the implication of Hanam, means eradication. Hanopaya means the means, method, the instruments, the tools, the means for eradication of this state of imperfection. How do we do that? By practicing this higher knowledge, this higher awareness. Viveka Khyati, that is the technical word used in the yoga vocabulary, which has got 7 stages in its evolution. So this is the essence of this. Now I shall try to explain the Sankhya philosophy, which I have already done a few times, but this time we have to do it more elaborately. Swami Vivekananda has given a very interesting analysis of the state of imperfection in his commentary on the 18th sutra, in his own words, which will some of Swami Vivekananda's words we will try to refer to in this context. It is apparently the most beautiful and direct exposition of the fact that the present state of embodiment is itself is something we should get out of, something we should transcend. Now, to give a philosophical background, as I mentioned earlier, the exponent of yoga philosophy, as we know, is Patanjali. The exponent of Sankhya philosophy, which is actually the philosophical system that yoga relies upon, is called Kapila. His name is Kapila, the great sage. And according to him, there are 2 fundamental categories. One is Purusha, the other is Prakriti. Purusha is consciousness, it is conscious, it is effulgent, it is ever free, and it is our true nature. Prakriti, on the other hand, it consists of 3 gunas, Sattva-guna, Rajo-guna, Tamo-guna, which explain the diversity of our psychological temperaments. Why we are sometimes happy, why sometimes unhappy, why we are sometimes confused, why sometimes we feel a kind of lingering pain within, sometimes we feel exalted, elevated. All these feelings will come. It's all due to the interplay, the juxtaposition of these 3 gunas, Sattva guna, Rajo guna, Tamo guna. A state of serenity and wisdom is Sattva guna. A state of blind hyperactivity is called Rajo guna. A state of stupor, a state of inaction, ignorance is Tamo guna. So these 3 gunas explain our different moods. Now, according to Sankhya philosophy, Prakriti consists of these 3 gunas. And from this Prakriti, from this called Pradhanam, from this Prakriti, the entire universe evolves. So our intelligence, our senses of perception, senses of action, the empirical universe, our mind, our intellect, all these are different evolutes of this Prakriti, which is essentially Jada, inert. Now in Shankaracharya's commentaries on, we call Prasthanatraya, the Upanishads, Gita and Brahma Sutras and elsewhere, you find Shankaracharya, he calls the Sankhya philosophy as Pradhanamalla, means the chief opponent. So what he says is, Sankhya philosophy is very profound because it tells you some wonderful truths about our state of mind, our feelings and emotions. But Sankhya philosophy is philosophically defective because it believes in plurality. For example, Purusha is conscious, Prakriti is unconscious. From this unconscious inert Prakriti, the whole world evolves. How can an inert entity be the cause, origin of evolution of the universe? So there's a philosophical contradiction. It's called a fallacy. It's called. Anyway, I'm not going to those details. Those who are interested can ask questions during interaction. So, from this Prakriti, the entire universe evolves. First, Mahat, that is the first evolute. From Mahat, Ahankara, the ego system. And this Ahankara has got three dimensions, Sattva-guna, Rajo-guna and Tamo-guna. From Sattva-guna, these Jnanendriyas and Karmendriyas or mind all evolve. From Rajo-guna, also some of the Indriyas evolve. From Tamo-guna, Pancha Tanmatras and Pancha Mahabhutas, which constitute the entire universe, evolves. The well-known verse in this Sankhya Karika is Mula Prakriti Avikriti Mahadadhyaha Prakriti Vigritaya Sapta Shodashagastu Vikaro Na Prakriti Na Vikriti Purusha. So Purusha is neither Prakriti because it is not what you call an evolvent. Evolvent means the source of evolution. It is not evolved. It is not a product of evolution. The Purusha is all consciousness efforts. But Prakriti is the fundamental, the original source of evolution. Now somehow what happens, we have forgotten our true identity, our true personality, that we are Purusha. Instead, what we have done, we have made this tremendous blunder, the great blunder. It is kind of self-hypnotism, you may call it. So Vivekananda sometimes uses the word self-hypnotism. And he says we should de-hypnotize ourselves. Means we should try to get out of this state of hypnotism. Means we should become aware of our true identity. This may sound a bit too dry and impractical, but it has got a great important value. Yoga and Sankhya remind us that we are something other than this physical body. Because that is the very premise on which Advaita Vedanta is built. Yoga and Sankhya tell us, Sankhya philosophy tells us that we are not this material universe. We are not just a bundle of matter. We are something more than that. But somehow we are deluded ourselves into thinking that we are this physical universe. We are just a material entity. It's a great blunder that we have committed ourselves. So those of you who got the text, you can see the 18th sutra, and after that we will come to 16th sutra. Because this directly tells us the fundamental problem that yoga is striving to resolve. So sutra, 18th sutra is Prakasha Kriya Sthiti Sheelam Bhudendriyatmakam Bhogapavargartham Drishyam. It's a very long sutra. The 18th sutra. 18th sutra in the Patanjali Yoga Sutra actually tells us our problem. It tells us that somehow we have self-hypnotized ourselves. When we lose money and wealth and we are not able to sleep, it is because we think this body is the most important thing. And therefore, the tools for enjoyment constitute the most important thing. So, when we lose wealth, we are lost. We become too much worried, we lose our sleep. That's because these tools, these means for bhoga, means experience or enjoyment, are the most important things so far as we are concerned. And this is a great fall. It's very different from the concept of fall that you find in Milton's Paradise Lost, or maybe in the Abrahamic traditions, or sometimes in the popular Hindu monotheistic religious traditions, Vaishnava, Shakta, etc. You find. What is it? A God somehow disinherited us from our property. So you are no more heirs to my property, father tells the son. You deny the son what actually belongs to him. It is a very judgmental and very arbitrary, absolutely irrational. But Sankhya and Vedanta tell us that we have somehow forgotten our true inheritance, our true spiritual inheritance. We should reclaim our spiritual inheritance. And according to Patanjali, yoga is the means for gradually reclaiming our spiritual inheritance. So the sutra is this. It can be split into smaller words. That's what it in Sanskrit is. Drishyam prakasha kriya sthiti sheelam bhudendriyatmakam bhogapavargartham. This is the sutra. The drishyam, it comes at the end of the sutra, but if you put it in the prose order, logical prose order, drishyam should become at the beginning of the sutra. So what it means is, these experiences composed of different elements and organs is actually of the nature of illumination, action and inertia. These three gunas. That's what it means. So different indriyas, different elements, different characteristics, mind, intellect, all these. And in reality, what happens is, when we try to claim back our true identity, which is Purusha, then it is called apavarga. Apavarga here means moksha or liberation. So once we understand this, eventually we will get out of this bondage. Now, how does it work in our everyday life? So Swami Vivekananda, more than 120, 30 years back, he has given arguably the most elementary and also logical introduction to this concept in his writings on the Yoga Sutra. So Swami, I shall just read Vivekananda's words now. It comes in his first volume. You find in his commentary on the 18th Sutra. So Swamiji says, the Purusha has as it were forgotten its mighty godly nature. We are actually Purusha. We are actually the conscious reality, the effulgent reality. But somehow we have forgotten that. There is a story of the king of the gods, Indra, once became a pig wallowing in the mire. Anyway, there's a story. Swamiji actually is taking a story from the Puranas and mythological literature, just to give an idea of how and what it looks like. So it says, Indra is the name of the chief of angels. So gods, small letter gods, roughly are equivalent to angels as understood in the Christian theological tradition, like the great angels inhabiting heavens, celestial beings who are good natured, who are helping human beings, who are embodiment of Sattva-guna. So Indra is the chief of that. It's a big position actually. Now what happens now? Then what happens? But he somehow forgot his true identity, and he, at will, he can disguise, or he can take the form of animals, human beings, or whatever he wants. So one day, maybe for a hobby or for a joke, he became a pig. That's a story. And then what happens? And it went to a mire, and wallowing in the mire, he had his family. The pig had his own sheep, children, and so on. He thought it's a very wonderful place to live, a very wonderful experience. But then the gods, the angels became worried because Indra is the chief of these angels. So they wanted to remind this big pig, telling, you are not really pig, you are actually Indra. So they all came in a procession and requested him to get back to his real form. But Indra had forgotten his true identity, and he thought he was a very wonderful pig with his own family and wallowing in this dirty, damp place full of mud and filth, and he thought this is the best place in the world. This life is the most happy, pleasant experience one can have. So gods tried their best to convince Indra, this is not your true nature. You have disinherited yourself of your true stature. But then Indra refused to believe. Finally, they had to destroy his body. So the real Indra came out. Then he laughed at the whole thing as a joke. This is an example Swamiji has put before us. And it's a very wonderful example. There are references in one or two sentences in some of the commentaries to this Indro Maya Vipuruvevadiyada. You can find like that. So the point is, somehow we have forgotten our spiritual identity, and we have deluded ourselves into thinking that we are these embodiments, we are nothing other than this 150 pound, maybe 5 feet 9 inches human structure, which has a wonderful time in this world, and it depends upon money, wealth, everything, and if anything happens, immediately everything collapses because we have disinherited ourselves. We have lost our own true identity. We have forgotten our own identity. So yoga is an attempt to make you forcibly remember your true identity. So how do we do that? We reverse the evolution. We have evolved from Prakriti. And from Prakriti, Mahatattva, Ahankara, Panchatanmatra, then Panchamahabhutas, constituting this empirical universe of material things which exist only for a short time and then disappear. So what happens? We have identified ourselves wrongly to be this material entity, enjoying and suffering, and again enjoying and again suffering. Now yoga is an attempt to remind us. Sometimes we may need some hard knocks on our head, and then we may go to the library and maybe take a copy of yoga, Bible, maybe, depending upon what you like. And well, is there something more than all this? But yoga actually tells you that don't wait for the heavy knock on your head. You wake up yourself before getting the knock. That is the true implication of the first word in the Yoga Sutra, Atha Yoga Anushasana. Atha means now onwards, henceforth. We will discuss, we will instruct yoga. So yoga means, in other words, yoga means looking for some higher transcendental reality to our, and meaning and relevance to our life. So thereby reaching our own spiritual identity. So I thought I should refer to Swamiji's very wonderful exposition of this. Now we'll come to the 16th sutra. 16th sutra is Heyam Dukkham Anagadam. So what is heya? Yeah, heya means tyajyam, something to be got rid of, something to be renounced, something to be transcended, something to be removed. That is heyam. What is heyam? Anagadam dukkham. Anagadam means not yet arrived, yet to come. That is anagadam. Naagadam means something that is not yet arrived, what is going to happen, what could happen. That dukkha, that state of imperfection should be got rid of. So if we can study yoga, yoga places a mirror in front of us. And if we study Yoga Sutra, whether you need not even believe in God, and that is the beauty, the charm, and also the uniqueness of yoga. Yoga can be studied in a very secular manner. Yoga Sutras do not constitute a religious text. So people who don't want to have anything to do with religion, they are welcome to study yoga, because yoga actually tells us all about our life, its meaning and significance. And so yoga says, anagadam dukkham heyam. Dukkha or imperfection which has not yet arrived, but which could arrive in future, that should be avoided. How? By equipping our mind with the right intellectual tools, by becoming intelligent and wise enough. So what about the dukkha that is already arrived? And Vedanta, Buddhism, Yoga, all these tell us that we have to work out our karmas, extinguish the karmas. Means this physical body and what we have experienced till today, till now, it has already arrived, we have already experienced. So on the basis of what we have done, we may have to work out our karmas. We may have to pay the price for it. But if you practice yoga, you will know that. And so once you know that, then we can avoid the devastating shock. I mentioned earlier, once you know that there will be a traffic jam, traffic problem 10 miles away, when you reach the spot, then you can be relaxed because you are expecting that. Your mind is ready for it. Like that, yoga tells us what to expect and how to avoid unpleasantness in this journey of life. So that is the meaning of heyam, the dukkham, anagadam. What it means is here. Okay. Perhaps we can read a little longer in this. Of course, this chain of sufferings already begun to be worked out, but we can avoid the problems that we may have to face in future. The next sutra is Drigdrisyayogo Samyogo Heya Hetuhu. So what is the cause of this? What is the cause, the reason for this dukkha? Drigdrisyayogo Samyogaha Heya Hetuhu. Purusha and Buddhi, the first evolute of Prakriti, they come together. So what happens? The Purusha loses its true identity. It identifies itself with what the Buddhi or intellect experiences. Intellect or mind, pain and pleasure. So whatever we have to experience, we identify with that. And accordingly, we become happy or unhappy, pleasant or unpleasant. That state of going through happiness and unhappiness, unpleasant and pleasant, that state is a state of bondage. And that should be got rid of. That is the implication of the 18th Sutra that we already discussed. How we lose our true identity and we disinherit ourselves from our true spiritual inheritance, and we identify ourselves with what we see and hear and think and touch and smell. I mean, all the five senses, all the time, drive the mind and intellect to various sense objects. And when the mind comes in contact with these sense objects, the mind goes through various experiences, pain and pleasure. And that state is considered to be a state of imperfection. So it is called dukkha. And that state of dukkha or imperfection is the disease, yoga, in the Chaturvyuha, in the quadrangle of yoga philosophy and yoga psychology. That's the idea behind. Of course, there is according to Vyasa, the commentator Vyasa gives an example. I may, two words are here. Drashtu drishyayoho. So drashta is the word. Drashta means the experiencer, the perceiver, the subject, the witness. That's the drashta. That is Purusha. That is our true identity. Drishya constitutes these evolutes. Whatever we experience is drishya. Drishya literally means what is seen. But by implication, it means what is heard, what is smelt, what is touched, and what is tasted, and what is seen. So all these five senses which experience the empirical world and bring their sensations to the mind, delude the mind into thinking that it is part of this empirical universe. And eventually our true identity, Purusha itself, gets hypnotized and deluded into thinking that it is not Purusha, and it wrongly identifies itself with Prakriti. So according to yoga philosophy, all the problems are because we forget our true identity. Once we remember our true identity, we will be able to experience, and we will be able to correctly understand and interpret what we experience in the empirical universe. We may have to go through unpleasant and pleasant experiences. The point is, our firm conviction and our own true identity that we are the Purusha will help us to look at this empirical universe and experiences coming from the empirical universe as part of the game of life. So we will be able to see them and experience them without being affected by them. That's called witness. So remember, when you read Swamiji's complete work, sometimes you have to remember, you may find Swamiji equates Purusha with Atman. So that is an important point, remember. The one fundamental difference that you find in the modern translations of Yoga Sutras and Swami Vivekananda's interpretation is Swamiji has given a philosophical interpretation to Yoga Sutras from a highly metaphysical and spiritual perspective. So very often Swamiji has identified Purusha as Atman. There is a reason for this. In Shankaracharya's commentary, Shankaracharya, who established Advaita Vedanta, he says this Purusha is consciousness, is conscious, but then it cannot be just inactive, because according to Sankhya philosophy and yoga philosophy, Purusha is consciousness but inactive. Prakriti is inert but active. That's why Prakriti becomes the cause of evolution. Swamiji, on the other hand, has interpreted Purusha of yoga philosophy as Atman, identical with Atman, which is the witness. When we, according to Vedanta also, when we identify ourselves as something that goes beyond the body, mind and intellect. When we assert our true identity that we are Atman, then we will be able to live in this world. You may have to face problems, but you know that problems are part of this imperfect world. Because basically the word itself is dukkha. Dukkha means incomplete or imperfect. It is a mixture of good, bad and good, bad coming one after another. That is sattva-guna, rajo-guna, tamo-guna. And you are the real Atman, the witness, the Purusha. And once you realize this, you will be able to live in this world, you will be able to witness and see everything around you, and at the same time you will be able to detach yourself from all this. So you won't worry about it. That ability to detach ourselves by asserting our true spiritual identity, that is the real purpose of yoga. So Swamiji has given a very philosophical interpretation from a spiritual perspective. So those who read Sankhya, Yoga Sutra translations elsewhere will be puzzled because really speaking, Yoga Sutras by themselves do not have a very strong metaphysical foundation. Its conclusion is a bit shaky, but its analysis is absolutely wonderful. So Vedanta has taken the yoga analysis of mind and universe completely, but Vedanta doesn't accept its conclusion, because the conclusion according to yoga is these two, Purusha and Prakriti, remain eternally distinct and different from each other. They are two fundamental categories. That's what, but Vyasa says, Buddhivrittehe samvedanasya pratibimba pratidhvanivat ayam prayogaha. That's a very interpretation. What it means is, this Purusha is it is the reality reflected in buddhi, according to Vyasa. Another very important statement that Vyasa says is, Drishyam ayaskanta manikalpa sannidhi matropagari drishyattvena bhavati purushasya swam drishyarupasya swaminaha. What it means is, our mind, chitta, this mind, like a magnet, helps by its proximity and by its objectivity, becomes the property of Purusha. Its proprietor is of the nature of pure consciousness. So what happens is, this action of the buddhi has been compared by Vyasa to that of a magnet. So what happens is, our intellect or mind, it naturally gets attracted to external objects. Like a magnet gets attracted to a piece of iron. And then this chitta, this mind, contains the properties, the characteristics and the reflection of these objects which are reflected. And as a result of this, what happens is, every passing experience creates its impression on the chitta. So everything we see, everything we hear, everything we interact with, all these experiences in the empirical world will have their influence on the mental system. And as a result of this, we keep on ourselves identifying with every passing experience. So this happening, as a result of this, what happens, we remain in a state of deep spiritual sleep, a stupor, because we have forgotten our true identity, which is Purusha. This is sometimes commentators called, well, the anadi maya supto yadha jiva prabudhide ajam anidram aswapnam advaidam buddhide tatha. Is a Mandukya Karya. What it means is, we remain in a state of long sleep because we are deluded by every passing experiences at the mental level. So we have forgotten our true identity. And once we regain our true identity that we are the Purusha, then this dukkha, this state of imperfection will vanish. Then we attain freedom, liberation through viveka khyadi, spiritual enlightenment. That is the way to kaivalya, liberation. Very similar, these ideas are being taken by Buddhists also. In Buddhism, for example, nirvana is the path for liberation. What is nirvana? Nirvana is the result of our dictating, our ability to dictate the root of this cyclic rotation of life. Birth, life, rebirth. This continues, which constitutes praditya samutpada, this dual link. And the root of all this is desire. And this desire for external things. You remember the trishna or desire in Buddhism, it has got a very powerful connotation. In the sense, it is the root cause of this cyclic rotation of life. I mean, going through this cyclic wheel of birth, life, death and rebirth. And when we practice this Ashtanga Yoga or the 8 disciplines, eightfold discipline, then we reach nirvana, we get out of this cyclic rotation. Samyak Smriti, Samyak Sankalpa, Samyak Vyayama and Samyak Samadhi, all these. When we practice these eightfold disciplines, we get back to our true identity. So many Buddhists have taken the yoga psychology and yoga philosophy completely and interpreted it according to themselves. Especially Yogacara philosophy, it's part of Mahayana Buddhism, has borrowed a lot of these ideas from yoga psychology and yoga philosophy. I think we have already finished the 18th sutra, now we go to 19th sutra. 19th sutra gives nothing but an analysis of the evolution. Okay. So 19th sutra is Vishesha, Avishesha, Linga, Matralingani, Gunaparvani. That's the meaning here. So Vishesha, the word Vishesha here means 5 elements and 11 senses of perception and senses of action. One sense is mind. So mind is called an Indriya in the yoga system and also in the context of Vedanta. Mind is a sense, like the eyes. It is included in that category, though mind is superior to the 5 senses of perception. So these 11 senses, I mean the 5 senses of perception and the 5 senses of action and mind, they are called Visheshas. And plus 5 elements which constitute the universe, empirical universe. And again the Ahankara, the ego system, and the 5 Tanmatras, the subtle elements of 5 elements, etc. And then Lingamatram, which is actually the first evolute of Prakriti, that is Mahatattva. And then Mula Prakriti, that is Prakriti itself. All these are nothing but manifestations of Sattva Guna, Rajo Guna and Tamo Guna. In other words, this particular sutra tells us that everything is nothing but a constitution of the 3 gunas. These 3 gunas determine how we act, we think, we behave. When we see an object, how we interpret that object, what we see with our eyes. Our interpretation depends upon the particular guna that is dominant in our character. A man like Buddha will see something in one object. A different person who has not spiritually evolved may see something else because his mind reacts accordingly. And again, a person who is endowed with Rajoguna we'll see something else, something that prompts action. The same object may not attract a sattvic person because he is serene, is composed. But same object can prompt a person into dynamic action. And the same object, when a person endowed with the tamoguna, who is dull and inert by nature, he may not see any meaning in it. So these three gunas determine and constitute our action and response to various things in this world. The next sutra is 20th sutra. Drashta Drissimatra Suddhobi Pratyanupasyaka. Drashta. Here, Drashta means the Purusha. Drissimatra. Drissimatra means it is Jnana Suruva. It's of the nature of ultimate truth or knowledge. It is Suddha. Suddha means pure. Purusha doesn't evolve. Evolution takes place at Prakriti. Prakriti is the source of our evolution because it is constituted by the three gunas. And these three gunas, due to the interchange and interplay, they cause the evolution of everything all the way from cosmic intelligence. It's called Mahatattvam or Buddhi in yoga system, all the way to the five elements. So yoga is nothing but an attempt to slowly de-identify ourselves with the five elements. When we see the empirical universe, when we interact with them, if we can witness them, see them without being affected by them, without being influenced by them, then what happens? We are evolved and we are slowly going beyond the five elements. Again, when we are able to de-identify, detach ourselves from something that attracts our mind, then we are evolving beyond mind. And again, at a higher stage, when we are able to detach ourselves from what our buddhi brings in, then we are evolving further beyond buddhi and we reach Prakriti. At that stage, we identify ourselves with Purusha when we detach ourselves from Prakriti. So it is called Pradiprasava or reverse evolution. So the purpose of yoga is to evolve further, not a physical level. There is no scope for further evolution to physical level, but there is a lot of scope for evolving at the level of culture, values and spirituality. That is the shortest, the simplest way of explaining the purpose of yoga. I mean, to evolve backward. Evolving backward means ascending. By evolution, we have come down to the lowest level, the rock bottom of five elements. Now we have to reverse this evolution. It may be called, counter evolution or reverse evolution. You can find the influence of this idea in Aurobindo's philosophy. Those who have read Aurobindo's philosophy find he says we have to go further, we have to go beyond matter, life. Eventually, we have to identify ourselves the Superman, our true integrator Superman, integral yoga. It is nothing but interpretation of some of these teachings from a different perspective. But one point is, yoga tells us one important truth. It is possible for us to evolve even from where we stand now. Every person has the potential to evolve. But that evolution actually is reverse evolution. Because evolving, the normal sense means going further down along the path of the five elements. But here, we are ascending. Evolution actually means descending from Prakriti to five elements. Pradiprasava, as the Yoga Sutra uses, as terms it, counter evolution or reverse evolution means we are ascending And that is a real evolution. It's reverse evolution. We can, when we take to music, higher painting, when we try to practice higher values, when we engage our mind and intellect and the senses in some higher pursuits, we are actually beginning a new kind of evolution, that is reverse evolution. We are climbing the steps, going upward, ascending. On the other hand, when we are influenced by the most utilitarian, selfish desires, when we are entangled in the language of Vedanta called Maya, so to speak, or when we are entangled in the trap of five elements or our desires and sensual pleasures, we are descending further down, we are going down and down. But when we detach ourselves from all these by employing our time, energy and abilities and interest in some higher pursuits, we are slowly beginning to counter-evolve, means ascending, going beyond all this. That is the purpose of yoga. That is the real implication of Atha. From now onwards, we are going to evolve, not as we evolved till now, but evolving the opposite direction. It means ascent. Evolution, as we understand, is a descent. Evolution in yoga means counter-evolution, means ascent, going beyond the senses, going beyond the five subtle elements and mantras, going beyond egoism, beyond the cosmic intelligence, up to Prakriti, the source of evolution, and then we detach ourselves from Prakriti, we identify ourselves with Purusha, the consciousness. It's called the ascent. That's what you find in some ways in the Aurobindo's philosophy. Of course, slightly put in different language. Thank you. Now we have interaction. It's open to you. Most welcome. Yeah.
Hari Om, Swamiji.
Hari Om, yeah.
Swamiji, I have two questions. The first question is this. So you were talking about this small fable where Indra forgets his true identity and goes and lives as a pig, and when all the devas come and ask him, he says he's very happy as a pig. Right? So at some level, all of us, what we are searching for is Ananda. And how does one know that someone, so when someone is feeling happy, how does one know that they are not truly into happiness and are actually looking for identifying something else?
Very, very, thank you. I shall answer this question, very important question and very, very focused question. The point is, there are two types of enjoyment. One kind of enjoyment is like the one side of a coin. The other side of the coin is misery. That's true with regard to most of what we experience, empirical enjoyments. So, in other words, this kind of enjoyment, worldly enjoyments, is not Ananda. The word Ananda has got a definite, well-defined meaning in Vedanta and of course elsewhere. This is only, it is only Sukham as we understand. Sukham, the Sanskrit word, not Ananda. It is only a temporary absence of misery. Because every feeling, every experience of enjoyment in the empirical world is only a temporary postponement or absence of misery. Because after this is over, even when your enjoyment goes down, you feel unhappy because you want more enjoyment. And even when you are status quo, then also you will be unhappy because you want more. And frequently, you won't be able to experience the same success, same enjoyment throughout continuously as an unbroken series. So, perpetual and lasting and continuous enjoyment is impossible in the empirical world. So that is one kind of sukham, as we call, enjoyment or happiness, the empirical sense. There is another kind of, it may be called blissfulness. It is not the absence of misery. It is bliss, it is enjoyment itself. It's like a coin with only one side, which is inconceivable in the empirical world. Now, that you can get only through identifying with something transcendental, something higher. Because when you have reached that level of ananda, which is the real meaning of ananda, then you'll be able to look upon both happiness and misery as the same. Because when you are miserable, you know it's not going to continue for too long. When you are very happy, you know it's not going to continue for too long. So you won't be lost in happiness when you're happy, and you won't be shattered by the misery, because you know that it's going to change, it's not going to remain the same. So, and sukham atyandikam yattad buddhigrahim atindriyam, in the Gita, Lord Krishna says, this transcendental happiness, it is blissfulness, that is atyandikam sukham. It is an unbroken, a continuous, a lasting feeling of inner contentment. That's the real meaning of inner contentment. It is a spiritual quality. It can be acquired only by spiritual practices or by identifying also with a spiritual goal, a spiritual ideal. That's the first question. Second question, please continue. Yeah.
Thank you, Swami. Second question is this. In the end, you were talking about when we are able to identify from what attracts the mind, we are evolving beyond the mind.
Yeah.
Similarly, when we detach ourselves from what the buddhi brings us, we are evolving to Prakriti. And then finally, you said when we detach ourselves from Prakriti, that's when we get towards Purusha. Yeah. So, I'm finding it difficult to visualize how it would be when someone is moving from this phase where they are attaching themselves to buddhi to Prakriti.
Yeah.
I can understand detaching from the mind into the buddhi, but what does detaching from the buddhi to just attaching with Prakriti or identifying with Prakriti?
Yeah, actually buddhi or mahattattvam, as is used in the Sankhya system, it is the cosmic intelligence. It's the first evolute. It's a mahadadhya, it means the first evolute of Prakriti. First evolute. And from mahattattvam, this ahankara and mind, all this come, Now, going beyond buddhi, here is not intellect as we understand it. Anything that we pursue, or any instrument by which we pursue, by identify, it is the cosmic intelligence. That is meant here. Mahattattvam it is called, or mahat it is called. Now, once it of course, it is higher than mind, higher than ahankara, but still it causes you to come further down. Once you reach the mahat level in your evolution, at the next stage you will certainly reach the ahankara level, and then eventually mind, senses, tanmatras and panchamahabhutas, 5 elements. So unless you are able to go beyond mahattattvam, you won't be able to reach the source of evolution, Prakriti. And before reaching there, you won't understand that you made a mistake when you forgot that you are Purusha. When you forgot you are Purusha and you wrongly associated, you wrongly identify yourself with Prakriti, that mistake one will not be able to recognize unless you reach that level. It is a matter of spiritual evolution. Now remember, don't try to analyze this as we analyze a mathematical equation of something. It is essentially a matter of human experience. When a person identifies himself with empirical things, he's always worried, exhausted, anxious, happy now and miserable next moment, again happy. So all these problems are because we identify ourselves with these fleeting, changing experiences. As we become even mentally, intellectually mature, as we attain maturity, and as we go further beyond, then you find you are able to laugh at the way you mistook all these insignificant things and lost your sleep when you lost them. So, you say that the same Indra, when he realized, when he came out of that big body, then he was laughing at the whole thing. Remember, the story is given, actually Swamiji's genius was, perhaps such a story will give an idea of our true condition in this world, in his naked, in his total nakedness, so to speak. Because that's what we are doing actually. Sri Ramakrishna, Swami Vivekananda's guru, put in a much more interesting language. See, a camel goes on eating thorny bush, and it feels miserable, it feels pain, but it also tastes the blood that coming out of its own mouth, its own tongue, and it goes on eating more and more. Why? Because it enjoys the taste of the blood that is oozing out of his mouth, but it also crying and weeping and wailing. No, something like that. That is actually, I don't think there is a more apt illustration of the misery of human existence. Because that's true. Everywhere, today if you go to any university, any well-educated person, you ask, are you happy? I'm happy. After some time, he is not happy. So you find there is an inherent imperfection about everything. And everybody is aware of it. Everybody is aware of it. There is nobody in the world who is not complaining. I've seen that. That was the test that Buddha employed. Somebody came to Buddha, an old woman came. It's a parable. An old woman came and she complained she had lost her son. Crying and weeping. Buddha tried to console her. But Buddha couldn't do anything. Finally, Buddha gave her a little mustard seed. That's the story, maybe. No, it's another story. Buddha asked her to go about finding a home where nobody has died anytime. I think that's a story, parable. Buddha told this lady, you please go about and find out one home where nobody has died anytime. And she came back after a long time. She said, no, there is no home anywhere where nobody has ever died. So do you think everyone has experienced this? Yes. Then she was completely consoled. Like that, in reality, dukkha, dukkha is not misery in that sense. A feeling of incompleteness, a lingering feeling of incompleteness. But we should remember, we already discussed in the 15th Sutra, this higher feeling of imperfection is a luxury, a special luxury reserved for mature people, evolved people. That's why in Parinama Tapasamskarehi Guna Visheshacha Dukkhameva Sarvam Vivekinaha. For whom does this world feel incomplete? Vivekinaha. Viveka means those who are highly evolved. Those who are highly evolved, that's why Vyasa says, Yoginam eva Krishnadi. The Parinama Dukkha Nama, this Parinama Dukkha, this kind of inherent imperfection with the world and all its worldly enjoyments and sufferings, all that we normally call worldly enjoyments, it is a source of misery, not for everyone. The pig was very happy. Pig had to come out of its body to understand that the life of a pig is not something very wonderful. When the pig was a pig, he thought it's the best thing that he can have. That's what Swamiji says. Similarly, those who are not highly evolved, for them, this world is wonderful. It only means that would take maybe a few thousands of life cycles to understand, well, there is something imperfect in this. So it is a symptom of spiritual and intellectual maturity. Remember, this is this is very important principle. It's not misery for everyone. is a misery for those who are highly evolved. That's an important point. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank
Pranam Maharaj.
you.
According to Sankhya and Yoga, the Prakriti evolves into Buddhi and then Ahankara and then three gunas. But according to Bhagavad Gita, chapter 18, Lord Krishna says, Karta and Buddhi have three gunas. How do the evolutes affect the previous?
Kartrutvam and bhoktrutvam. I mean, I am the doer, I am the enjoyer of what I am doing. All these happen, all these feelings come to us when we are not reached the highest spiritual realization. Kartrutvam and bhoktrutvam are depicted as signs of avidya or ignorance. We call imperfection, of course, that's not dukkha, in that sense not used in Gita. So kartrutvam and bhoktrutvam, these are signs of avidya. Remember. So that's an important point. If a person feels aham karta, aham bhokta, it's only because of avidya and ignorance. Those who have reached spiritual realization, for them, karmanya karmaya pasyet, akarmani cha karmayaka, sabuddhiman manusheshu sayukta krishna karma krita. So sabuddhiman manusheshu sayukta krishna karma krita. So Krishna uses sabuddhiman, he is the really spiritually intelligent man. Krishna karma krita means he is doing everything. Yukta means yogi. See, a yogi is the wise person and is the one who does everything. Who? The one who sees inaction in action and who sees action in inaction. So the highest version, he may be busy 24 hours of the day, 7 days of the week. Still he thinks, I am Atman. Only my senses are working. My karmendriyas and jnanendriyas, mind are working. But I am the Atman that goes beyond all this. And so what happens, I am doing, but actually I am not doing anything. So he will be able to see inaction even when he is always busy. He is able to see action when he is not doing anything, because the idea of action and inaction are interrelated. You cannot say you are not doing anything when the very idea of action is absent. So, those who are buddhiman, yukta, krishna karma. Buddhiman means the spiritually wise person. Yukta means yogi, the spiritually enlightened person. He is doing everything. Still, he doesn't identify himself with anything. He says, my indriyas are engaged in these actions. I am something different for it. This kind of detachment, that is natural for Sthita Prajnas, it's natural for the highest karma yogis and also jnanis. That's the idea behind.
Sorry Maharaj, I did not phrase the question clearly. The buddhi is described as three types of buddhi: sattvika buddhi, rajasic buddhi and tamasic buddhi. Buddhi is the cause for the gunas. How do these gunas affect the buddhi?
Buddhi is not the cause for gunas. Buddhi is not. Remember, these three gunas constitute the operational dimension, the functional nature of Prakriti. Prakriti evolves because Prakriti is constituted by these three gunas. Evolution takes the path of domination of one of the other of the three gunas. Everything in this world is constituted by the intermixture of these gunas. So Prakriti is actually constituted by these three gunas. And from Prakriti, Buddhi evolves. But remember that Mahattatvam Buddhi, as depicted in the Sankhya philosophy, as the first evolute of Prakriti, is different from what we normally understand intellect in Vedanta. So remember, the word buddhi has got one important definite meaning in the Sankhya system. It has got a different meaning in Vedanta system. In Vedanta, buddhi is the nischayatmika antakarana vritti buddhi. It is a decision-making faculty. It is buddhi. But in Sankhya, buddhi is as an evolute. Its function, of course, it has got a functional dimension also. It also works as intellect, no doubt about it. But at the first evolute, Mahatuttam buddhi, the cosmic intelligence. It is not the intelligence of a person. In the Gita, Lord Krishna says, our buddhi, our mind, our actions, our feelings, all these reflect the three gunas one way or other. So that is the meaning in which Vedanta interprets buddhi and three gunas. This should be understood. These are two different systems of philosophy. In the Sankhya system, the word, there is a yoga system. Chittam, buddhi, all these have got a very specified, well-defined implication. That is not implication in which the word buddhi is used in the Gita. In the Gita, buddhi is used in the sense of decision-making faculty. And that is nischayatmika antakarana vritti buddhi. That's sankalpa vikalpatmika antakarana vritti mana. These kind of distinctions are not found in the yoga system. Yeah, this is understood, remember. This is. So another interesting I tell you, mind in Sankhya system is one of the evolutes of ahankaras. But buddhi in the Sankhya system is higher than ahankara. It is the first evolute. From mahattatvam buddhi, ahankara comes. And from sattvika ahankara, mind comes. Rajasya ahankara, indriyas come, and so on. So remember, the meaning of buddhi in the Sankhya system, yoga system is different from what it implies in the Vedanta system. So one should study the bhashyas properly to understand what a particular term implies in the Gita system. The nischayatmika antakarana vritti buddhi. This is Shankaracharya's definition. It is accepted Vedanta Sara and Vedanta Paribhasha elsewhere. Okay.
Thank you, Maharaj.
Thank you.
Go ahead, AJ. Your turn to ask question.
Yeah.
Namaste, Swamiji. Thank you for taking my question.
Yeah.
So you mentioned about counter evolution.
Yeah.
So that is really kind of progress in the spiritual manner, if I understood it right.
Yeah.
So if you can please give us some pointers. So day-to-day life, it's difficult to, easy to forget that, right? Especially around us, we see people who think they are highly evolved and proud of themselves, and those kind of start becoming our role models. So maybe, during the day, end of the day, what should we look for to ensure that we are kind of keeping in mind the counter-evolution and some of the things we practice that will help us move towards counter-evolution?
Yeah. Okay, I will tell you. In the first sutra of Sadhanapada, that is Tapaswadhyaya Ishara Pranidhananani Kriya Yoga, the first sutra of Sadhanapada. Now, the Kriya Yoga is the beginning, is the first step, is the door, the entrance to this counter evolution. Because that's how we enter the path of yoga. Karma yoga, jnana yoga, bhakti yoga, or feeding our mind with spiritual food, resigning to God. Any of these disciplines can slowly help us to detach ourselves from the world of empirical worldly enjoyments and detach ourselves from all this. And that's how we begin. To give an example, if you listen to the previous lectures, we understand, especially the lectures on Kriya Yoga, which I elaborated in great detail during the early sessions. So, for example, the first thing, for a normal person, let's say in 21st century, living in the Bay Area, How do we step into yoga? How do we practice? I want to start this counter evolution. What should we do? Doing something good, something noble. Physically, intellectually, verbally. If a person cannot take interest in spiritual subjects, do some physical activity. If possible, one can also practice these spiritual disciplines. That's what happens, any activity without a selfish motive, it's called karma yoga, or any kind of spiritual disciplines will generate spiritual energy. Physical energy can be converted into spiritual energy. Suppose there is a muscular man, not endowed with much brain, but a strong person physically, can do a lot of physical work. Suppose there is a temple or a church or any kind of maybe place where people, and suppose the place is dirty, if you go and clean up that place, actually you find, after a few days, you find a lot of inner joy. Oh, I have done something. You find people talking about. I have seen this happening here, devotees who come to Vedanta Society for all kinds of volunteer work. Why they come? They are highly endowed people, highly educated professionals, CEOs, bank presidents, doctors, lawyers, poets, all of them come. Why they do? Because by engaging in this kind of activities, for which they get nothing, absolutely nothing, they have to spend their time and energy. Why they do all this? They do it because their actions, for which they get nothing, but those actions are meant for the good of others. Those actions generate spiritual energy. And when spiritual energy is generated in our mind, how we feel about it? We feel a kind of inner contentment, kind of inner perfection, inner completeness. Oh, I have done something worthwhile. People, rich people, very stingy people who won't help anyone, and those who are suffering from lots of health problems, made trillions of dollars, billions of dollars, but can't get 4 hours sleep. That man one day issues a check, let us say, to help somebody, some people in far off countries and continents suffering from natural calamities or something. That night, why he does it? He feels a little relaxation. That's the only word, very, very ordinary word. In fact, that is the most elementary word that can use. The man feels, little happy, relaxation. So he does it. And he goes to sleep. He sleeps better that day. Why? Nobody knows that what he has done it. Because any such noble activity, the subjective level produces a spiritual wealth. And when this spiritual energy is generated, we can feel it. How do we feel it? You feel a kind of strange feeling of inner contentment and happiness. And it is something very precious. You can't buy it in the markets. You may be the richest man in the world, but you may be living the most miserable life if you don't have this. So, anyone can do any day, any moment, any kind of noble activity. Physical activity, verbal activity, intellectual activity, anything. Actually, why I am giving the Yoga Sutra lectures? I get nothing. I have to give so many lectures every day. Because by doing this, I get a great joy. Whether you are benefited or not, for you to decide. But the fact is, I am very happy about it. I don't know why. And people, many people, thankfully, many people are happy about it. They are very grateful. And that's enough. That's a great thing. To be very frank with you, if you look at the lives of great men and great women, they are the happiest. Not physically. They also have go through BP, blood pressure, all these problems. They also have, because the body is imperfect. But still, even with all these, they do great things. You can look at the face of Stephen Hawking. Nothing very wonderful, physically speaking. But this great man, he spent his lifetime giving, writing articles, of course with the help of somebody else, his own people, family. So you find many great examples all over the world you find. So if you do something noble, good and great, that is of some help to others, whether they are helped or not, you are benefited. So that is the greatness of it. So anyone can step into yoga. Yoga here means not standing on your head. Yoga actually means standing on your feet. In a spiritual sense, that's what yoga really implies. Because it helps us to generate spiritual energy, and that helps us to live a confident, a really joyful life. It's not the fleeting joys of the world, a really blessed life. That is what yoga is trying. So when you step into that, actually you are beginning your ascent, and you feel this ascent. When you feel, in Sanskrit we call kridakrityata and kridartha, means where I have done something worthwhile. That feeling, that contentment. Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Go ahead, Jatin. Ask your questions.
I think we have 5 minutes more. 5 minutes more. Thank you.
Should I go ahead?
Yes, go ahead, Jatin.
Yeah, Pranam Swamiji. I have a question regarding flow state in positive psychology.
Yeah.
So, which says like if you interact with one subject for a long time, you have happiness. So, in my case, I usually get like in that state when I'm playing sports or in like solving a problem, like math problem or something. Now, associating long time with these kind of activities, does that bring negative samskara and dukkha eventually?
According to, I don't want to mix yoga psychology with positive psychology, but I want to confine myself to yoga psychology. Now, from a yoga perspective, if you are interested in cricket and you go on playing cricket, if you are interested in mathematics, you go on doing solving mathematical problems. That need not necessarily produce spiritual energy. That's something very important. It's a matter of your interest. But suppose you are doing this without any selfish motive, without any professional obligation, because it's part of your professional obligation, then many other factors are intertwined about it. But the point is, if it is something that benefits others, without any selfish motive, selfish purpose, then only your activity will generate spiritual energy. Otherwise, there are many people, there are boxers and wrestlers and champions and sportsmen, they spend their whole lifetime for that. I don't know whether they are starting their counter evolution or not. I'm not sure. I don't want to give my opinion on this subject. But according to yoga psychology, tapaswadhyaya sarvapriyananda kriya yoga, only an activity which is totally freedom from selfishness, totally unselfish, totally without any selfish motive, which also benefits others in some ways or other. That alone can be part of Kriya Yoga. Or, of course, if you are engaged in spiritual disciplines, which that of course also can produce spiritual energy. Just because a person is interested in something, so he spends a lot of time engaging that, need not necessarily produce spiritual energy and can be beginning of counter evolution. No, it can't be. This is an important point. So I don't want to mix yoga psychology with positive psychology, because frequently one tiny bit of ideas are taken from yoga psychology and you make it a big mountain of it and you give it a very wonderful name. But I want to limit the discussion to yoga psychology. According to Kriya Yoga, which is the beginning of life in yoga psychology, any kind of activity without any selfish motive, which benefits others, can produce spiritual energy, and that can be the beginning of your spiritual ascent. That's the idea.
Thank you, Swami.
Thank you. I think we have we have reached the end of the time. Thank you very much. Especially, I should special thanks to those ask the questions. Thank you very much. Okay. Yeah. Okay. We shall conclude. Anyone? Maybe one more question. I'm ready to take. If you have.
One question, Maharaj.
Yeah.
I had a question. So we talked about Purusha and Prakriti.
Yeah.
My question is it a collective consciousness or individual consciousness? Are they different?
Yeah. Okay. Now.
Because,
yoga psychology, yoga system, yoga philosophy has taken its foundation, its basic tenets from Sankhya system. It's a pluralistic system. There are as many Purushas. They believe in the Aneka Purushavada, I find. So each individual jiva is his own destiny, not one Purusha. So each jiva has descended along this path of evolution and reached the 5 elements, and each jiva has to start his journey upward, reaching the final goal of total identification with Purusha. You can continue this discussion next session. Most welcome. Thank you.
Okay, Maharaj. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om Tat Sat Sri Rama Krishna Arpanamastu.